A lot of professionalism is racist, and you've noticed that white people in Seattle have a really hard time seeing that. Oh, honey, let me tell you about my time in California as a woman from the South. You are certainly not alone in this. Now, I actually did my second paper of my dissertation on the unwritten rules of work that align with white supremacy culture framework, the framework from the 1990s by Kenneth Jones and Tima Okun. That's for free, linked in my bio if you're interested. The story is I used to work at Stanford. I was on a research project, the largest national qualitative research study on poverty in the United States during COVID. What a time. I got the contract to go out there to build their hiring system, train all the researchers, and then ended up doing a little research myself with some pretty famous poverty researchers, which was super cool. But in my downtime, since it was COVID and California actually took the pandemic extra seriously, for Americans at least, there was not much I could do. It was mostly virtual. I'd already moved out there, and pretty much the only place I could go was outside. And I was still astounded by how many places, and this place I've been told my whole life was super gay and liberal, still were monuments to colonization. So one of my favorite spots was Pacifica State Beach, and there is still a monument, at least there was in 2020, 2021, about when the Spanish discovered that part of California, what we now call California. And I was like, that doesn't seem real what we're told about this place, right? The truth is every fucking place in America is touched by racism, or it would be run by indigenous Americans. If it was not deemed acceptable for a group of Europeans, different groups, multiple groups of Europeans, to come over here with swords and guns and disease, the U.S. would not exist, not in the way that we know it today. And that was also very clear to me in many interactions at work. That place is actually what inspired me to look into what does white supremacy culture mean, because even with super smart people who spent a lot of time researching and wanting to do better, there were still some things I had to learn as someone doing hiring and training on why are some people struggling more than others? Why are some people reporting bias more than others? What are things I can do to try to address this? And I was doing this as I was doing my dissertation on the unwritten rules of work. And that is why the dissertation expanded into the second paper, because I was like, that was my part of the awakening journey of there are some things that are just considered normal that have been taught and trained and institutionalized. And when I am setting up systems, I have a responsibility to be aware of if I bake those into the system or not. And I'll be honest with you, we performed way better as an organization once I and my peers got better at designing these systems in a better way. Our turnover plummeted. There were far fewer complaints. There were far few barriers to getting the work done. They weren't gone. It didn't mean we didn't have to have more difficult conversations or that they were completely avoided. But I mean, there was substantial return on investment, which I know is a gross way to talk about unpacking your own biases. It is because I speak that way because I am an industrial organizational psychologist, so I'm always looking at the impacts on people and business, and because we are in an era where people are trying to tell you that the woke mob, affirmative action, everything, trying to run it on the ground, and like literally most of the data doesn't support that. That's just not how it works. We are seeing things just being run on venture capital and bad vibes. And how's that going? So I do find it very funny how, I haven't gotten it recently, but when I first started TikToking, I would get comments from people being like, wow, we just don't have this problem in California. Okay, y'all don't talk about it in California. Maybe not in your part, at least. California is far from a monolith. A lot of California is Republican. We just don't think of it that way because of the Electoral College. California certainly has the diversity in certain spaces for it to be noticed and understood, which means there are some underlying beliefs there or parts of your habits and systems keeping you from seeing how things are happening. And I say this as a white woman from Florida who was so ignorant that I never even knew a Hispanic serving institution existed until I ended up in one for grad school. But I was really grateful that I went to one of those first before I ever entered the elite or Ivy League, because I would not have been as challenged, and there would have been a lot more that I would have just seen as normal. If I hadn't been in a place that was like, hey, this isn't necessarily built for you, so you're welcome here, but we do things a little differently, and that's fine. If you find any of this interesting, you should certainly read the dissertation paper. That's for free. I also just have my book come back out. All the links are in my bio, where I tell stories about how I have built systems, where I have fucked up, and what I would recommend you do if you are in these situations, whether you're navigating them as staff, or you have a little power as a people leader, or you're in human resources. Also, side note, the places that have a real focus on politeness often have horrible histories. So that is true for the American South. That is also true for England. That you can think of places like Japan, places that we know as having great hospitality, being really, really polite, kind, because they aren't consciously, but they are subconsciously compensating for that their ancestors have done some horrible fucking things. Anyway, if that's of interest to y'all, let me know. I just moved back to the States last night. Now that I'm here, I am going to try to show y'all more citations, show y'all more of the papers where I'm pulling this stuff from. If any of that research, like about niceness in the South, etc., you're interested in seeing, let me know, please, before I put a ton of energy into it, because video editing is not my forte. So please let me know if it is, like, gonna be worth it.